We all have something that we have been putting off for a very long time that's on our to-do list, but we just keep delaying and procrastinating on doing it, but that can often make us more stressed.
Exactly. We have the intention to do it, we know we need to, but we just don't.
And people can think procrastination is related to being lazy or having poor time management skills, but really it's about kind of the emotions that we come up against when we try and do some of these tricky tasks that we're putting off.
So in this week's episode, we're talking all about procrastination. What is it? Why we do it? And most importantly, how can we stop it or reduce it? The content in this podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing we say should be taken as individualized advice. If anything you hear brings up concerns for you, we strongly encourage you to speak with your GP, psychologist, or another qualified health professional.
We would like to acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional owners of the unceded lands of the Kulin Nation on which this podcast is recorded. We acknowledge their rich history and honour the ongoing connection to land, waters, culture and community.
Welcome to This Might Help, a podcast bridging the gap between evidence-based psychology research and your everyday life. We're your hosts. I'm Dr. Kira Hart.
And I'm Dr. Lauren Rossetti. And today we're talking all about procrastination, the story of my life. We're going to talk about what it actually is, why we actually procrastinate, and then some strategies and tools that we can use to overcome procrastination as well. But before we get stuck into the topic, let's do our wellbeing wins and wobbles for the week.
Let's do it. My wellbeing win was I went for some really lovely walks after work in the evenings.
With the daylight savings happening.
Yeah, amazing. My wellbeing wobble was not so great. I got a parking fine. You were there with me when I got it.
That wasn't good.
Yeah, take the wins with the wobbles. What about you?
You should preface, actually no, maybe you shouldn't. But I'm just gonna you should do like the background rewind noise on
some
me.
Things we keep secret from our listeners.
Yeah, which is required. And that's okay. My wellbeing win is voice memos or voice notes.
Yeah.
I feel like I've spoken about this before in the friendship episode, but I had a tricky time and then I was able to send a voice memo to my friends, like unpacking everything, asking for their advice, just like offloading my life. And that is so helpful. I love doing that. So voice memos, send a voice memo to someone. I love it. That's a wellbeing win for me. Wellbeing wobble. I did have one. Oh no, I remember now. So I do this thing with drinking my coffee. Like I'll go and I'll buy a coffee and I pay, however much coffees are at the moment, which is lots. And I love coffee, but I'll sip it and then I get like distracted by other things or I'm doing stuff. The next minute, my coffee is cold.
An hour later, yeah.
And there's still 3/4 of it or a half of it left in the coffee cup and I've paid, $6.50 for this delicious coffee and I'm drinking it iced cold. And it's not an iced coffee. That was not the intention. The intention was hot cappuccino.
I usually just put it in the microwave for 30 seconds and then have it hot again.
It's like kind of sad because I've spent I've spent money on the coffee. I want to enjoy it.
Yes.
And then I get to my desk and I sit there and time has passed cold coffee.
That is a shame.
That's my wellbeing wobble. So today we are talking about procrastination. Like I said, story of my life. We are talking about, I guess what procrastination actually kind of does, like, or the way that procrastination works, why that's coming through and happening for us. It's something I think we all relate to, procrastinating, and whether it's, I think we all probably procrastinate on different things, but everyone does procrastinate on something. You really need to do something and you fully intend to do it, but then you just don't do it.
Exactly. Procrastination is sometimes thought of as like a time management problem or a laziness problem. But today we're going to unpack the psychology behind procrastination and explain why it's happening.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your personal experience with procrastination.
I feel that I live in the cycle of like, and we'll talk about why this happens later, but, you know, putting off these things that are really tricky or big tasks, and then it all leading up to this moment before a deadline where I finally overcome that, and then I cram or work really hard for this like brief, intense, stressful period of time.
Yes.
And live in that cycle. Like when I was at uni or at school, I always was someone, like I was never someone that got the assignment on week 1 and started slowly chipping away at it over the 4 weeks until it was due. I was a person that didn't look at that for the 3 weeks, and then, you know, 2 nights before thought, oh my gosh, I've got this giant assignment, and then would like cram and work really hard on it for like 2 intense days or nights and then submit it.
Yep.
I've just always been like that, and we'll unpack that.
I think
today.
so many people are
Yeah.
leaving things to the last minute when there's that really high pressure environment to get things done.
Which we talked about in our stress curve stuff way earlier in this podcast. What's your procrastination kind of looking like?
I'm okay in terms of like breaking things down into tasks in terms of like work or when I was in uni work, school work, etc. I think at the moment I really procrastinate when it comes to bedtime. Like if my housemates are up having a chat, there is no way I'm going to bed at like 9 o'clock when I intended to. I will be up yapping to them, and I'll just get really bad FOMO if I don't. So in terms of like going to bed when I say I'm going to, I definitely procrastinate with that.
Yeah.
And last week's episode, we spoke about conflict and confrontation. And historically, I've really procrastinated with having difficult conversations with people, and I've just like avoided it or be like, oh no, like I just won't bring it up.
Yeah.
But yes, that's something I'm working on as well, like those difficult conversations, having them sooner rather than later.
Yes.
So let's start today's discussion by talking about what procrastination actually is.
Yes. So a lot of our understanding of procrastination comes from a couple of key researchers who have done a lot of work on procrastination. Yeah. That's Dr. Tim Pitchell and Dr. Fuchsia Sawar. They've kind of driven the research in this space. There's also a few great podcast episodes where they have spoken to someone or done an interview about procrastination and about their work, which we'll link in the show notes, because they were also a big source of our research for today's episode. They define procrastination as the voluntary delay of an intended action despite knowing you'll be worse off for the delay. So there's a few key parts to that. It's voluntary. So we're choosing to put something off. We intended to do the thing. So there was a plan to do it actually in place, or it's kind of like on your list of things that you want to do. You know also that it will make things worse. So there is some type of like negative consequence for delaying the task.
So it's not procrastination if you had no intention of ever doing it in the first place, or also if there's like an external factor that prevents you from doing the task. So for example, you wanted to do something, but suddenly you've been called into a last minute emergency meeting, so you haven't been able to do the task. You're not procrastinating that situation. You've just been taken to do something else.
Yeah. There is a misperception, like we talked about, that procrastination is about kind of being lazy or not motivated enough or having poor time management skills. But there are psychological theories kind of behind procrastination that show it's really about this emotional regulation skill. So needing to escape negative emotions. So there's that psychological kind of theory that underpins procrastination, which we'll unpack in this episode.
Exactly. And procrastination isn't laziness. So if you listen to this and you're like, oh, I procrastinate, please don't think you're lazy. Procrastinators often work really, really hard just not on the thing or the task at hand that they're supposed to be doing. So for example, someone might have a uni assignment to do and there's a deadline for that, but they might procrastinate and clean their room or procrastinate and do some other work to avoid starting that task.
Yeah, I do this a lot with like every other little bits and pieces of work that I can do.
Yes.
Apart from some big tricky thing. So it'll be like, oh, I'll reply to all of the emails really quickly. I'll tick off all of these simple admin tasks that take me 2 seconds and build this sense of like efficiency and success, you know, like you do them and you're like, yep, that was easy, did that really well. So I'll do like all the admin things around the big thing that I actually need to do.
Yeah.
And so might have been working for hours, just not on the thing that's at the top of my list.
Yeah.
The life
all been
we live.
guilty.
This leads to that huge rush and panic that I was talking about with my uni assignment lifestyle, is that you kind of build up this rush and panic and you wait until the stress is high enough to kind of push you past procrastination. So it can get so stressful, so kind of immediate that you have to take action. But then that obviously leads to those super high stress, intense periods of work and late nights and all of those things to get stuff done. If we're talking about kind of more the work related procrastination, which is obviously not particularly good for our health and our well-being.
Exactly. And procrastination, I know we've spoken a lot about like work, and we will speak a lot about like work or like university study examples. And a lot of the research has been based on work procrastination. However, we can procrastinate in many different areas of our life, as I'm sure we're all aware. For example, another big area is health, or like going to the doctor's or dentist appointments and procrastinating those health appointments. Relationships are another area, and I know I am guilty of like procrastinating having those difficult conversations with people, or some people procrastinate like building relationships or seeking out new relationships and going on first dates, etc. And there's, so many different areas of life, even like big life decisions that might feel really overwhelming and daunting. People procrastinate on because they are so overwhelming.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's talk about why procrastination actually happens and how our emotions really play into this.
So the research shows that we procrastinate often to escape those negative emotions triggered by tasks. We prioritize and we want to feel good. So we prioritize doing that in the moment and avoid those negative feelings that, you know, might come with doing a boring task or having a difficult conversation. So we prioritize the positive over the long-term gain of reaching those goals.
Yeah.
So what often happens is we encounter a task that triggers negative emotions. Maybe that's anxiety, boredom, frustration, overwhelm, and we want to escape those feelings immediately. We're like, get me out of here. I don't want to deal with this. By avoiding the task, we're met with instant relief, which is nice. We have a sense of like, oh, okay, I just won't worry about that. We feel better right away, which is good in the short term. However, this creates long-term problems and overall more stress, anxiety, and just delays the progress and actually undertaking tasks.
Yeah. It's also then a vicious cycle because you procrastinate and so you feel better temporarily, but the task still exists or the thing still exists, and often now with more pressure and more time pressure, or it's grown to be a bit of a bigger problem.
Yes.
So what we talked about with like conflicts and managing conflicts last week's episode, what maybe started off as a small little thing, when it's procrastinated, it may grow into some big thing that's a lot harder to tackle.
Yeah.
And then this creates more negative emotion. So the guilt from procrastinating, shame and stress on top of all of the original feelings of the task or the thing being tricky to do. And that makes it less desirable to do it, which then makes you more likely to procrastinate again. And so it is that cycle that kind of often only breaks when something becomes like pressing enough to do. But you might then, because you've been through that cycle, continue to procrastinate on other things as well.
Exactly. And another big element of this is that people often undersell or discount the negative consequences of the future. So people might play things down and be like, oh, this is a future me problem, I'll deal with it later. But when we don't address things immediately, things snowball and get worse over time.
Yeah. Tim Pitchell calls it the tomorrow illusion. So we imagine that we have unlimited motivation and kind of energy in the future. So it's like, oh, tomorrow I'll feel like really good and I can do that then. Mm-hmm. But we're the same person the next day, and we're probably now kind of more stressed about that thing. And then that makes us less efficient to get it done. So our brains make these future tasks seem kind of less effortful than they actually are. And we think, yeah, I'll do it tomorrow. We're underestimating still how hard it might be tomorrow when tomorrow does come around.
Yeah.
I do this a lot with underestimating how long things will take. So I might put off doing the thing in the moment because I've got X amount of time tomorrow, but then it either that time gets taken up by other stuff tomorrow, or it gets to then and it takes way longer than I planned for.
Yes. I have this example that probably happened to me about 15 years ago when I was in high school, but it rocked me to my core. So I still think about it whenever I'm like, don't delay a task because you don't know what will happen. I had a weekend to study for a maths test on the Monday, and I remember on the Saturday, it was a beautiful day, and I was like, oh no, I won't study. I'll study tomorrow on the Sunday. And then Saturday night, I got salmonella and I was like really, really sick. So on the Sunday, I couldn't study. And then I went into the maths test not having studied. And I think about that being like, don't delay tasks and assume, oh yeah, I can do that later, because you never know what's going to pop up or if you'll fall violently ill. And okay, salmonella's not that bad, but I did, like, I was obviously sick.
Taken off the Monday, or you were okay? Yeah,
I was just a trooper. I went back to school on the Monday. It's honestly an example for 15 years ago, so I hope that my details aren't too hazy. But moral of the story, things can pop up and don't delay tasks.
Yeah, the moral stands, absolutely.
So procrastination shows up in lots of different areas of life. As we've said, the most studied and well-researched areas are around academic and work procrastination, but there's also health-related procrastination, which can have some pretty serious consequences. Research shows that procrastination is associated with higher stress levels, more acute health problems, fewer wellness behaviours, and delayed medical checkups.
Yeah. And that can even look like things related to kind of maintaining healthy lifestyle habits like exercise,
sleep,
and healthy eating and sleep. Yes, exactly like what you said. But even, I'll get around to like starting to go for runs, or I'll get around to like signing up for this exercise thing when like all of the circumstances are right. So we might have reasons or like things that we say or use as why we need to delay that thing. But really, if we're more prone to procrastinating, then we can delay implementing those healthy lifestyle changes too, which I'm sure we've all experienced.
Yes, we've all been there,
especially with sleep. There's bedtime procrastination, which is literally what we're talking about with the sleep. And this is when, like what you were saying, Kira, if you fail to go to bed on the intended time, but there's nothing necessarily stopping you from doing that, which of course lots of us do.
Other than my own willpower.
But you're not lazy.
Not lazy. I just love a good chat with my housemates.
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of delaying for the immediate reward, right? Like it's more immediately rewarding to experience the chat, and it's more uncomfortable to go to sleep. But we know that there's a negative consequence from that. Like
the next day.
The next day I'm going to be tired and not as effective. And a lot of us do that.
So there's also decision-making procrastination. This is a big one. This is when we delay making decisions rather than delaying like tasks.
Yeah. So you might just keep going with what you're doing rather than needing to make the choice. We really talked about this a lot in the decision fatigue episode,
Yes.
when we are thinking about things like sitting down and you're going to watch something and we're just delaying making that choice. And again, it comes back to those feelings of discomfort of like, what if we choose the wrong option or choose the wrong thing?
Yeah.
And so it's, delaying then us actually taking the action and moving forward. There can be levels to procrastination as well. So it's not, like we said at the beginning, everyone kind of procrastinates. People procrastinate on different things, but there are also, I guess, there's this chronic or what we might call trait procrastination, and that's when you really procrastinate on almost everything and it can kind of become a part of your identity.
Yeah.
So are you smiling at me because this is me? Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, it is me. Chronic procrastinators are kind of more likely to procrastinate tasks when they're seen as evaluating their abilities. So it's then more kind of, it feels more like a threat then. You know, this comes back to what we'll talk about with like perfectionism and all of these other things that play into procrastination. But when you feel that success or performing really well is part of your identity, but then you do a task that is tricky, you're more likely then to procrastinate that because of this fear around what if I'm not successful at this thing, or what if it doesn't go as planned.
Yeah.
But yes, there can, like, even I'm thinking about the way I described it with, I've always been this way, like even that language, like I've always done this with assignments.
Yes.
I've always done this with work. I always leave everything to the last minute. And I have a few very close friends and other people I've been through kind of my uni journey with who are really similar. And we do talk about ourselves in that way, like kind of it being a part of our identity, that's our work style. Yeah. And so we're probably chronic procrastinators, which need to work on. There's also situational procrastination, and that's like you only procrastinate in kind of specific contexts or for certain types of activities. So it might be you always kind of procrastinate health-related appointments or something, and that's kind of the specific area of procrastination. So 2 different types of procrastination, but what triggers it? Like, what is some of these underlying things that then can breed that procrastination?
Everyone is different, but there's some common triggers for procrastination. Some of them are anxiety, feelings of perfectionism and having those really high standards, and fear of failure. They all play big roles in triggering procrastination. There's also like that maladaptive perfectionism where we have such a concern over making a mistake or fearing criticism so much that we don't do a task or we postpone doing a task, and that obviously increases our procrastination.
The perfectionism element of this and that kind of fear of failure and just, I guess, underlying anxiety around procrastination can also serve to be self-preserving. So if you procrastinate and then you fail at the task, and I guess we're, using that word fail, but it might even be that it doesn't go to plan, or it's not the perfect quality or standard to which you hold yourself to. If you procrastinated and then that happens, you can tell yourself, I failed or this didn't go to plan because I didn't have enough time. Because I did it in 3 days, because I did it in 2 hours last night and I did it at 3 a.m., whatever it is. Yeah. Like you can tell yourself that the reason that didn't go the way that you wanted it to was because of that lack of time or the rush to get it done. Rather than I failed or I didn't get through this activity in the way I wanted, or I didn't perform the way I wanted because I'm not capable. So it provides this reason or justification for how things went.
Yeah.
And it protects your sense of ability and self-worth.
Yeah, so you can blame poor performance, and I say poor performance in quotation marks, but you can attribute your performance on not having enough time and doing it last minute rather than your abilities, because it feels much safer to do so.
Yeah, it's avoiding those negative emotions that you're associating with your identity. Like I need to be perfect. I'm really good at this. I'm a high achiever. I get stuff done. You know, I do things really well, especially if you've grown up or kind of through academic journeys or work journeys or whatever it is, even sporting or whatever that thing is that you hold as like something that you're good at. If you view yourself as always needing to be very good at that thing, procrastination might allow you to say, you know, oh, well, I didn't spend enough time on it, or I didn't train for long enough, or I didn't prepare the way I normally do. And so that's why this has happened. And so that can also play into or breed this cycle of procrastination. Essentially, when we're thinking about what underlies all of that, it's those negative feelings and those emotions that we get. And in this scenario, we're talking about those like uncomfortable emotions around like, what if we don't perform to the standard that we think that we're meant to? What if things don't go the way that we planned? What if we're not perfect all of the time?
Yeah.
And then that has all these negative emotions, and then to avoid them, we may procrastinate because that's really uncomfortable. Yeah. I'm thinking about where I've seen this happen in work, particularly when I was doing my PhD, like the parts of that were really tricky. So things like starting data analysis stuff where it may not have come as naturally to me as other things that I've done.
I was going to say that's really, really easy. Weird that you know.
I'm a statistical genius over here. With stuff like that is tricky. And I remember having conversations with psychology friends in my lab group about this all the time. I could feel it happening in the moment. So I'd go, I would know I've really got to start this data analysis, but it would feel so uncomfortable that I had no idea where to start. I didn't know what to do. It wasn't something that came easy to me, like that part of the work. And so I would always catch myself just like reaching and picking up my phone.
Yes.
Like I'd open the thing and you know, on reflection, I can see all of this, and in discussion with my friends, I can unpack it all. But in the moment, you don't necessarily label or know the emotional feeling, but it's just you open up the thing, it's too tricky, it's uncomfortable. And so I would immediately grab my phone because that's like the thing to distract myself from the emotion. So you use other things to procrastinate.
Yes.
And then, it took a long time to get over that like barrier to actually start the task. And then once you start it, it's so not as bad as you anticipated, right?
Yes.
We were talking about this with conflict too sometimes. Put off things for so long, stress and worry about how they're going to be, and then you start them and they're actually maybe way better than you thought.
You have the conversation with the person and they take it really well and they're really like kind and like considerate in the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I spent so long delaying this. I spent so long worrying about this thing, and then it was fine.
Yeah.
You know?
Not always, but a lot of the time.
A lot of the time. And even something I guess we did speak about this a little bit before, but with procrastination, it doesn't mean that you are necessarily doing a task and then you're just like on your phone and that's the procrastination. It can be all of those things like doing everything else around the thing to avoid that.
Replying to all the emails, cleaning your room, cleaning the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking to every other person except the person that you need to have a hard conversation with.
Yes.
Or, yeah.
So we've spoken a lot about what procrastination is and what triggers it, but what actually works to reduce procrastination?
Understanding why procrastination happens is just really helpful at a baseline to push through or to kind of understand your relationship with procrastination. And so knowing that we are generally procrastinating in order to avoid negative emotions, and that the psychological kind of underpinning of procrastination is this emotional regulation element, just knowing that really helps us to address the behaviors. So it's thinking about for ourselves. I mean, we've just kind of unpacked my procrastination cycle, but for all of us around where those negative emotions kind of come from. So is it boredom? Is it the perfectionism element? Is it the overwhelm? Is it the stress? Like, what is the kind of feeling or reason behind why you're putting off particular tasks? With like conflict with friends or family, what's that negative emotion? Is it like just the discomfort of needing to have a tricky conversation?
Yeah.
And once we understand that that's why we're delaying things, it's often easier to start.
And once we know why we're procrastinating and what those negative emotions that we're trying to avoid are, the research suggests that a really big way and a really important focus is showing yourself self-compassion to reduce procrastination. And on the flip side to that, self-criticism and being really harsh on yourself about procrastinating makes things worse.
That self-criticism creates more of those negative emotions, and that's exactly what's driving procrastination in the first place. So when we talked about that cycle of procrastination, kind of like avoiding the negative feelings, it creates more of them, and so then you want to procrastinate more, and how that cycles around. If we think about that, well, self-criticism and having kind of really harsh judgments of ourselves creates more of those negative emotions, and so then that can breed more procrastination. So we want to focus more on self-compassion.
Exactly, to break that cycle.
Yeah.
And how you can do that is recognizing that everyone struggles with procrastination at different times and showing yourself that self-kindness rather than that self-judgment and being harsh over yourself, just being understanding everyone procrastinates. Everyone wants to avoid these difficult feelings. I'm, not alone in this experience. And also acknowledging that discomfort and those negative feelings without trying to just make them go away. Acknowledging that, okay, having this conversation with this person does make me feel a little bit anxious, and that's because I care about the relationship with them, which is why I'm avoiding having the conversation with them. But yeah, just acknowledging those uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah, rather than just trying to avoid them by procrastinating the task. Given that we know procrastination is linked to this emotional regulation underpinning, those strategies around self-compassion are the most, I guess, shown within the research to be effective. So that's kind of the key thing to keep in mind with procrastination. But there are also some practical strategies that help us to get started with things, or help us to kind of make progress and overcome that barrier of just avoiding the task. I feel like a lot of these ideas and theories are spoken about really well in the book Atomic Habits, and that they kind of put this all together quite well. So that's something you could also listen to help. What are some of those strategies, Kira?
One of those strategies is if-then planning. So the format is if situation, then I will specific action. For example, if I feel stuck, then I will write a messy first draft of the report. Or when it is 9 a.m., then I will start a 25-minute work session on my report. So you're really taking action steps to plan out if something happens or when something happens, then I will ...
Yeah. I think about this with a writing like program retreat kind of thing that I went to.
Yeah.
And there, I guess a big barrier of getting started on like written work is that you start from a blank page and then it's really hard. Those feelings of discomfort come off and you procrastinate actually starting. And, you know, people talk about like the first sentence is the hardest or just getting started is the hardest thing. But they had us do like this kind of free writing thing. So you would just essentially have to start writing. You'd set a timer. So you'd be like 5 minutes or 10 minutes and you just write. It didn't matter about the quality. It was just getting the thoughts out of your brain onto paper or getting any words onto paper. And you weren't allowed to backspace. You just have to let the quality be whatever it is. But then you've got this base that you can work from and build from, which is way easier to progress with. And there's way less of that kind of negative emotions that come up with like editing and molding work rather than starting from nothing.
Yes.
And so that kind of helps, I guess, in a project or like work-based setting for overcoming procrastination.
Yeah.
But it's also similar to what some people implement with exercise as well. So, you know, if it's tricky to get started, it feels really uncomfortable to get started, then it might be, okay, well, I'm going to set a 5-minute timer and I'm just going to start with this bit first. Or I think in looking at some of the research for this episode, there was an example of I'm just going to roll out my yoga mat and stand on the mat.
Yeah.
And that's like that's all I have to do, but I'm going to do that first step and then go from there. Or I'm going to walk for 5 minutes. And if I really don't want to keep going, I'm going to come home. But often it's just putting in these like little things that we can do to get the ball rolling. And then once it is rolling, it's a lot easier to keep going.
I love that.
The if then planning also gives kind of control to the environment rather than relying on motivation in the moment. So, you know, when 9 a.m. hits, you've already decided what's happened. Like you've already made a plan of kind of how you're going to approach things, rather than thinking I'll do this when I feel like motivated or ready to do it, because often the motivation doesn't hit.
Yes.
And we need other strategies in place to push us over the threshold of procrastination, but also keeping this simple, because we can spend a lot of time planning or writing or preparing or doing lists of things, like mapping out how we're going to approach the activity or writing to-do lists, but using that as a form of procrastination in itself.
Yes. So you spend like half an hour writing a really detailed to-do list and not doing any of the things on it. Yep. Whereas you could write a few dot points and then get stuck into actually crossing things off the to-do list.
Yeah. Or like writing really detailed breakdowns of like all of the steps involved in a task, which feels good in the moment. Like it feels productive to, you know, get the list done and you've got all of the plan there. But if I'm being honest with myself, and I'm sure for others listening, sometimes we do that because we just actually don't want to get started on the thing.
Yes, definitely. Another strategy that's helpful is pairing something that we don't want to do with something that we really do want to do. So the idea behind this is making that delayed reward more immediate and more immediately gratifying. So I'm thinking of if someone dislikes going for a walk, or if someone dislikes walking on a treadmill, but they want to do it because they want to increase their physical exercise and physical activity, pairing it with something that they do really want to do. For example, it could be listening to a podcast or listening to an audiobook or scrolling TikTok or whatever you want to do, and pairing them together. So it's like, when I go for a walk, I'll listen to my favorite podcast, and then you're kind of getting some of that immediate gratification from doing the thing you're putting off going for a walk.
Yeah. Even the strategic breaks or the like rewards in breaks can be helpful for this. So,
Yes.
you know, like a Pomodoro technique, if I'm going to work really hard in these 25 minutes, I'm going to actually like work on the task.
Yeah.
But then I get this joyful 5-minute break where I
Yes.
get to, you know, do whatever, or I'm going to go get myself a coffee is often my reward.
When I have like a really big task to do, sometimes I'll go buy myself a bag of lollies as a reward to get me through and to help motivate me with the task.
Yeah.
And then I can work for 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and then I'll get a 5-minute snack break where I can eat my lollies. And then I'll go for another 30 minutes and then another lolly break.
Love that. We need lollies in our lives sometimes. There are other things that we can do in terms of kind of modifying our environment to help us. These are more focus related strategies or things. So go listen back to our episode on focus.
Yes.
Because they're in there in more detail. But things like when I was saying, you know, I noticed that a task was tricky and I was often reaching for my phone as like the immediate, you know, feel good thing to make myself feel better and also procrastinate from the task. So things like having your phone in another room or having kind of time blocks on your phone, or even, just getting distractions out of your space can help limit that. But also the social element, or relying on kind of social connections and other people to help us engage in activities that are tricky. So co-working with other people, often I'll have like little writing sessions with people. We might go take our laptops and a coffee, or go to the library or something and work on tricky stuff together, or kind of accountability partners too. So when we talked about friendships in another episode, we were talking about that research around when you've got someone by your side or you've got a friend with you, you feel more able to tackle challenging tasks.
Yeah.
And that's no different for the things that we procrastinate on. Yeah. If you've got someone there, you're like, yep, these negative, I guess the negative feelings maybe hold less weight, or it feels more like you are actually able to navigate or deal with those negative emotions because you have someone with you, which is nice.
When I was doing my PhD, which is quite an independent project, I had a study buddy, and we used to have weekly catch-ups where we'd chat about what we'd achieved that week, and it made the experience so much more enjoyable because I had a little cheerleader by my side, and we would just like encourage each other. And you know, I was always like so proud and happy with myself if I could go to our weekly catch-up and be like, this week I did this, this and this. And it was definitely a better experience, and I was more motivated to do it because I had my study buddy and my accountability partner. So shout out to her.
And even knowing that you've got those regular things in, it means that you're likely more motivated to make the steps so that you have the things to discuss.
Yeah.
But on the flip side also, it creates more kind of understanding and builds that self-compassion too, which we know is kind of the key thing to keep in mind with procrastination. When, you know, I'm sure there were times you sat down and that friend said, oh my gosh, I've got absolutely nothing done this week, or this has been a really tricky week, or this task's been really hard, I've been putting this thing off. And just knowing that other people are going through that thing, or, you know, you say that and then they're a friend and they're there for you saying like, that's okay, we all have that time, like let's get stuck into this thing, that creates opportunities for that self-compassion, which is the foundation of working with managing procrastination. You can be self-compassionate about how tricky it was for me to get that sentence out of my mouth.
You got there, well done.
Thank you, my psychology cheerleader here. That brings us to the end of episode 18.
Amazing.
Yeah, we've done lots of episodes now. It's still at the very beginning of our journey, but it feels like a achievement to have achieved 18. episodes. So we've talked lots about procrastination. As always, the resources and the references will be in the show notes, including some of the podcast episodes from those key researchers as well. If you would like to listen more to, especially they're the experts in this area, hear them chat about procrastination too.
Yeah.
You can also get in touch with us at This Might Help podcast on Instagram and TikTok. The video version is also on YouTube. If you want to watch us have lots of crazy hand gestures and whatnot.
Further helplines are always provided in the show notes if needed. And we would be so appreciative if you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, a family member, or someone who you think would enjoy the episode as well.
Someone who is a chronic procrastinator like myself might extra benefit from it too.
This might help them.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for listening.
Bye.